Make new friends, but keep the old ones. One is silver and the other is gold. Like so many of you, I grew up with this song. On this holy day when we're supposed to turn our attention in part to the relationships in our lives, figuring out how to strengthen them and seek forgiveness and forgive, this song teaches such an important lesson. Except when that old friend exposes her true colors. Before we go there, and we will, we need to revisit this morning's Torah reading. While Hagar's discovery of the well is relevant to many of us, there's another aspect of her story that speaks to me so loudly this year. Hagar gives so much of herself to build the family of Abraham and Sarah, but once her story disrupts the story of the neater nuclear family of Abraham and Sarah and Isaac, Hagar's story must be silenced, pushed far away into the desert, so everyone can just forget that she and Ishmael were ever a part of the nuclear family's story. But the reality is Hagar and Ishmael are not forgotten because we just read their story. Like so many Jews this past year, when I went to share my Jewish story, I found folks trying to silence me. I was told that my story inappropriately disrupted the narrative of others. As a result, my story, like Hagar and Ishmael, it was banished. But as I've come to appreciate my Jewish story, our Jewish story, it won't be silenced because it's resilient. It will be told. We are telling it loudly and proudly. A little background. I went to a very progressive liberal arts college in upstate New York. For various reasons, I was not an active member of the alumni community. That was until the murder of George Floyd in 2020. Down here in South Florida, Floyd's murder got me very involved in the fight against racism. And I worked with local Black and brown religious and political leaders to raise awareness to the hate and the discrimination that is still a plague in our country. During COVID, many of you joined our programs online where we tackled racism head on. The now president of my college class, someone I'd considered to be a close friend for over 30 years, joined some of these online programs. After attending, she pushed me to join our alumni community and share my work with our classmates. And within no time, despite being locked down by COVID, I was part of my graduating class's online discussions on the battle against racism that were broadcast to our classmates on our Facebook group. Along with Black and brown classmates who shared their personal stories, I was honored to be tapped as a speaker, sharing our anti-racism work down here in South Florida. Sadly, the battle we waged against racism would soon expand beyond the Black and brown communities and incorporate our Asian alumni. And as it did so, I proudly remained an ally to my classmates, lending my voice and support. As the pandemic waned and life got back to the new normal, my graduating class's online programming slowed down and our Facebook group began to fill up with mundane reflections from middle-aged graduates. There continued to be important posts addressing the fight against racism. There was a post encouraging us all to watch the film Bloodsport, which explores the NFL's handling of brain injuries and racial disparities in the way the Football League compensated injured players. There was also many political posts inviting us to lobby for activist causes and calling upon us to help a classmate win his election for Congress and turn his state blue. When these political posts would appear, I wasn't bothered by them. To me, they reflected the causes of classmates. But a classmate whom I've remained close with, someone who leans to the right politically, told me that the political posts were alienating, making it clear that her views were not part of our class's collective story. In the days and weeks following October 7th, I learned firsthand how my friend felt. Like so many of you, I shattered on October 7th. The overwhelming emotions I was feeling as the news came pouring in from Israel that horrid day intensified. When I learned that a kibbutz, which I have told you has become very important to me, Kfar Aza, had been brutally assaulted. I spent time there with other South Florida rabbis back in 2021, learning about life on the Gaza border, the beauty of this life, and the perils of living under regular fire from Hamas terrorists. One of our teachers on our visit to the kibbutz was Ophir Lipstein, as we mentioned earlier, of blessed memory, who, while trying to defend the kibbutz on October 7th, was murdered, along with his son Nitzan, his mother-in-law Bilha, and his nephew Netta. Kfar Aza, before October 7th, was like something out of a dream, an idyllic setting. To learn that it had been destroyed and so many of its people murdered and kidnapped was overwhelming. Because of my connection to the kibbutz, I'm so proud that Ramat Shalom Beth Israel was one of the first Jewish communities in the world to reach out to the leadership of Kfar Aza, offering them any help and support they needed to rebuild. On my trips to Israel since October 7th, I made it a point to visit the kibbutz. We've welcomed survivors of the kibbutz here at Ramat Shalom Beth Israel. And I know I'm not the only one, consider myself blessed for having made very special friends with people who built lives in this sacred place, including Lear and Aviv, new friends who proved the wisdom of that old song I grew up with, make new friends, but keep the old ones. One is silver and the other's gold. Following October 7th, I was grateful for the many family members and friends who reached out. Of course, so many of us reached out to each other and we gathered right here. I heard from our friends at the Ukrainian church down the street. If you remember, their priest, Father Michael, came to us with the church's president with a handmade cake decorated with the Israeli flag. Our friends in the Hindu community have wrapped their arms around us. In fact, they sent us a message just last night. Several local pastors and political leaders have stood on this bima and shared their love and prayers with us. But sadly, after October 7th, I didn't hear from any of the folks, specifically my college classmates, that I worked with on tackling racism. None of them. And my old friend, a dear friend of over 30 years, the class president, I heard nothing from her. Given the history of our relationship, this was shocking to me. So after several long days of silence, I wrote her privately, expressing my confusion and hurt. Her response, "Don't judge me." She went on to offer an excuse. She'd been very busy with travel and work and with assisting her boyfriend's sister who had been in an accident. I saw the writing on the wall, but I said I was sorry she was overwhelmed with so many things and offered well wishes for her boyfriend's sister. I never heard another word from her until I found it necessary to address my classmates on our Facebook group, which, by the way, contained no posts about October 7th. I wasn't going to reach out to the Facebook group. The silence on the page sent a powerful message. But when students and faculty paraded around my alma mater soon after October 7th, screaming from the river to the you-know-what, overwhelming Jewish students and faculty, and the college's Students for Justice in Palestine broadcast a statement to the campus community justifying the murder, the rape, and the assault of innocents in Israel, calling the invasion of the Jewish state a successful act of resilience, I could no longer be silent. And so I shared the following on my Facebook, my group college Facebook page, which I edited a bit to make it more concise. I've sat quietly, wondering if my class would say anything about the atrocities that took place on October 7th. A teacher of mine was one of the 1,200 people murdered by Hamas on that terrible day. A kibbutz I have been connected with had innocent adults and children slaughtered on it. There's been a 400% increase in hate directed at the Jewish world since the attack. I am living behind armed guards as a rabbi. It's an overwhelming time. The worst violence directed at us since the Holocaust. I understand the complexities associated with peace in the Middle East, but this is not about peace. This is about Israel, a sovereign nation, the Jewish state, being brutally assaulted, and Jews all over the globe being threatened. I was so proud to be a part of the important class discussions regarding the murder of George Floyd and hate directed at the Asian community. When it comes to the attack on Israel and the global Jewish community, the silence in this group, a group that expresses so much valid passion about trauma experienced by other ethnic and religious groups, the silence is stunning. I chose to post today after seeing videos capturing crowds of people on campus chanting from the river to the sea. The same group that led this chanting shared a statement justifying the attacks of October 7th. I share constantly that innocent Israelis and Palestinians are being held hostage by Hamas. This is not about Israelis and Palestinians. This is about radical terror groups that have embraced and put into place hatred that is equal to or worse than the Nazis. I simply want all of you to know that many Jewish, Israeli, and pro-Israel alumni are hurting and seeing what has happened since October 7th at our alma mater and so many other campuses has only made things worse. Within moments, my post was removed by my so-called friend, the class president, and her board. The same people who pulled me in to be a voice advocating for civil rights. They posted a statement in its place saying, our Facebook group is a platform for sharing classmate and college-related news and hosting, informing about activities and events for our class community. Posts not relevant to or not respectful, sorry, this is all coming back to me, will be blocked. The class president wrote me privately. I was surprised to hear from her, given that she was too busy to offer support after October 7th. And she informed me in a long message that my post was filled with my personal emotions and POVs, points of view, which addressed conflict and politics that made people uncomfortable. So, my post documenting offensive college-related news and events that hurt many of us who graduated from the college was removed not just because it was irrelevant, but because it triggered folks. Now, I found this fascinating as my classmates and I talked in our planning meetings for our anti-racism programs about the reality that these programs would make some classmates uncomfortable. Yet, none of us cared because we felt obligated to tackle the cause and ruffle the feathers that needed to be ruffled. When I posted what I did, the Jewish narrative became part of the story that has included Black and brown and Asian voices. A story that has included turning states blue and electing certain classmates. With my post, the Jewish community and our safety and security had a voice. And suddenly out of the blue, there was a need to be apolitical, non-confrontational, respectful of other people's feelings. People who felt what? That Hamas was justified in some way? That anti-Semitism is justified? To protect folks, the accepted communal narrative needed to resume, uninterrupted. The Jewish story had to be removed. I wasn't offended by the post highlighting the documentary of Black athletes who were not properly taken care of by the NFL. But was this relevant to campus life? I went to a seven-sister. They don't have football teams. I wasn't offended by the blatant political post endorsing candidates, political issues, and turning states blue. And our anti-racism program, which certainly triggered some, it was good. All of these class posts and programs were acceptable because they didn't involve the Jewish story. Upon being canceled, I realized that I had become that uppity Jew. My class leaders liked when I spoke up, but only when I was called upon. When I spoke up on my own, I was audacious. I had to be stopped because the Jewish story is not part of the accepted collective story. Our Jewish story, our heartache right now over October 7th, our fears over anti-Semitism in this country, our outrage over campus protests calling for Israel's destruction and justifying Hamas's action, all of this is offensive. It had to be banished, like Hagar and her story. When I was a child in Ukraine, then Israeli Prime Minister Golda Meir said to Henry Kissinger, my father would board us up in the basement, board up the windows of our house to protect us from the Cossacks who would get drunk and attack Jews. My father would hide us in the cellar. My father's face. Henry, I will never forget that look. All he wanted to do was to protect his children. I, Golda Meir said, I am not that little girl hiding in the cellar. My friend of over 30 years and her cohorts, along with many other people on the face of this planet, hate the fact that we Jews are not hiding in the cellar anymore. As Israel's Prime Minister Menachem Begin said, we're not Jews with trembling knees. We're angry, we're shaken, we're heartbroken, we're frightened, but we are fiercely proud. And while some try to cancel us, we will not be pushed back into that cellar. And the world doesn't know what to do with this. I'll be honest, after I was canceled, I was initially stunned. I was angry. I was depressed. This was my Hagar moment, and I closed my eyes seeking internal strength, and when I opened them, I saw you. I saw this community. I saw the global Jewish world coalescing into this incredibly powerful force. I saw Father Michael with his cake. I saw other religious leaders and local and national politicians standing here. I saw supporters whom I barely knew. I saw Lear and Aviv and other members of the kibbutz. I saw Israeli soldiers and their families who were giving everything for all of us. I bought what I could from Israeli shopkeepers determined to survive. I met Guy, a man in the hospital seriously wounded at the Nova Music Festival, committed to dancing again. I met the parents of hostages, including Rachel and John, Hirsch's mom and dad, at the White House. And I realized that my well, my source of strength, was right before me. My well is my people, family and friends who are like family. Jewish and other faiths, old and new, silver and gold. Rabbi Hillel taught us centuries ago, do not separate yourself from your community. We're the only ones who get each other, my friends. We need each other. We are each other's source of resiliency, and we can't do this alone. Let me say today, thank God for my community. In the Torah, we're reminded that on a regular basis, God puts before us life and death, blessing and curse. When this happens, the Torah says, choose life. When my former friend and other college classmates turned their back on me after October 7th, this was a curse. And for a moment, I couldn't see past it. But then I looked closely, and there were my people, my incredible blessing. I chose you. I chose life. And without any hesitation, and I will tell you with consultations with lawyers and college administrators, I ain't done yet, my friends. But without hesitation, I turned my back on the hate and realized how the people we surround ourselves with are an incredible and integral part of our own resiliency. In the ancient Jewish text, Pirkei Avot, we're told to acquire for ourselves a friend. We're obligated to do this because friends help each other reach and celebrate the highest of highs and strengthen each of us during the lowest of lows. They're an essential part of living a resilient life. This is why today our tradition pleads with us to repair our friendships, but at the same time, Judaism teaches us that sometimes friendships shatter, and no energy should be put into repairing them. In the same text, in Pirkei Avot, we're told to distance ourselves from the evil path of a chaver ra, a bad friend, someone who turns, embracing values that undermine our own, bringing toxic energy into our life. Judaism makes it clear, don't try to fix these people. Don't forgive or make excuses for them. Don't overlook their toxicity just because they've been a part of your life so long. Walk away and don't look back. While painful, I find myself filled with gratitude for the experience I had with my college class. It's taught me that we have the power to curate our friends, turning away from the toxic ones while filling our well with people who nourish our souls. By tapping into this power on a regular basis, we build a network of supporters who work together to lift each other up. It's a network of resiliency. Make new friends. Keep the old ones. and release those who tarnish our precious metals. While we do this, we're living Jewishly. So let's commit to living this way this year. Let's promise each other to surround ourselves with people who stand with us, people who want to be around us, and people we want to stand with. Together, let's empower each other to tell our stories loudly and discover how incredibly resilient we are. Shana Tova.